Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve and it was a huge week in FPL for game week 9 with many managers coming away with some pretty massive scores. I had a safety score of 88 points at my old rank of 51k heading into game week 9, which kind of goes to show exactly how big of a game week it was. Thankfully, I've beaten that by 8 points, which is not huge, but it is enough to take me from 51k all the way up to be inside the top 25k overall in the world, which I am over the moon with. I have 2 free transfers heading into game week 10 and a huge decision to make for game week 10, and that is whether to go with Watkins or swerve him and go with Saka in midfield instead. So before we get into the video, if you're not already a subscriber of this channel, consider subscribing, and if you enjoy the following content, give it a thumbs up. So, game week 9 review, I scored 94 points with an average of 67, safety score of 88 as I have already mentioned. To read the team out for you, I had Turner in net with 1 point, conceding 2 goals at the weekend. He was on for I think about 7 points partway through that game until they lost the clean sheet. Udogie was subbed this morning New Zealand time, or the evening over in England. He was subbed 4 minutes before the 60-minute mark, losing 5 points in the process. 1 for the extra appearance point for making it to 60 minutes, and of course the clean sheet, which all Pedro Porro owners did manage to lock into their squads, which was a little bit annoying. I think Udogie came off with a bit of a knock. It might have been a precautionary substitute by Postecoglou, as Udogie didn't look uncomfortable coming off the pitch, but he did come off in the 56th minute. Matty Cash lost his clean sheet to an absolute freak goal by Bowen, which was a super annoying way to lose the clean sheet, because not only did it wreck the clean sheet, but Bowen has in fact made it into a few teams around the place, and so there was a bit of a swing in terms of rank there. Dan Burn managed to negate Trippier's clean sheet by obviously coming away with a clean sheet himself, but Trippier does manage to get yet another assist and a 10-point haul, even if it was a bit of a jammy one. Trippier owners are loving life at the moment right now. Mbeumo, for his last game in my squad, as he definitely will be leaving this game week. The two sets of transfers that I do have lined up both include selling Mbeumo. He came away with his assist for Wissa, was an exceptional assist for the first goal, perfectly placed into Wissa's path for an easy tap in far post, and then his goal was just clinical as ever. Top bins, coming into it with a perfectly cushioned back pass to hit with the side of his foot far post. That is the stuff that dreams are made of for strikers. Maddison comes away with a very calmly taken goal that Son basically put on a plate for him as Spurs pressed Fulham to win the ball high up the pitch. It was a very quick ball into Son's feet. He put his head up, saw Maddison was clearly open, had a very easy goal scoring chance, and put a perfectly weighted pass into his path for Maddison to score the second goal in that game. Diaz, my differential in midfield was very lucky to come away with an assist, as it was his cross that struck the hand. I actually forget whose hand it actually struck, which gave the penalty to Salah, in which Salah sunk. Luis Diaz comes away with 6 points, including the clean sheet point there. Son, and with another clinical finish. I mean, his assist was great, but he scored the first goal, struck with the inside of his right foot, top bins from basically the edge of the 18-yard. It just goes to show exactly how lethal Son is in front of goal. Salah was, wow, it was great to get the points from Salah, but pretty annoying that Ole Salah, captain, has managed to pull in that 97th minute goal on a massive counter-attack, last kick of the game, to give all the captainers a 32-point haul, which is 8 points more than anyone who went with Haaland. So a little bit of luck at the end of the game for Salah there. Alvarez actually hit a bit of a scuffed shot to score that first goal in the City fixture. So we did get away with a bit of luck there, considering it did go in. And it managed to get him all 3 bonus points as well. Haaland scored, well, he actually pounced on a misplaced back pass. It's a bit of a tongue twister, and used a quick fire shot from the edge of the 18 that basically gave the keeper no chance, and showing that he is streaming with confidence, as he didn't feel he needed to get too close to the goal in order to hit that. He did have another very good opportunity later in that game. Very good shot from probably about 12 yards out. But that shot was unfortunately blocked by one of the defenders. You would have normally expected Haaland to pick that up, and which would have basically equaled Salah's points for the week. So we got a little bit unlucky there, but at least he still came away with some points. And that was pretty much it for my team. On the bench I have Johnston with 1 point, Kabore with 1 point, Woodrow with 1 point, and Baldock with 0, who has been injured for about 5 or 6 weeks in my team. I've got an incredibly dead bench, but it seems to be working pretty well for me at the moment. Elsewhere, from the players that I do not own, Ollie Watkins continues to return points, comes away with 11 points this week. So Alvarez has done pretty well to get 9. So he's only 2 points off the pace for Watkins. But Watkins looked quality all game. Aston Villa absolutely dominated West Ham in that whole match. And like I said in the video last week, Watkins is the only player that I do not own that I currently fear. I actually had no fear of Saka because I wasn't entirely sure whether or not he was going to be back and fully fit for this game week, and I wanted to see him get 90 minutes under the belt before I brought him back into my team to ensure that he isn't still injured. But I didn't really fear him in game week 9, but he is way up in my thoughts for game week 10, and he is the person that I am deciding between for either Watkins or Saka in a move where I'm going to be using both of my 2 free transfers this game week. United, my team that I support, scraped another win, but it was incredibly shabby. To repeat the words of one of my former football managers, who said this in the changing rooms after one of our pretty shabby wins, he said, it's like it's 3 a.m. after a long night out and you've pulled a bird. She ain't that pretty. In fact, she's a bit of a minger, and you won't be telling your mates about it in the morning, but at least she's in the cab. So that's about all I have to say on the United performance. They do host City this weekend, and I'm expecting United to get absolutely battered by Man City based on the way they are playing. United are they're off the pace, they're standing off the ball, there is no pressure on the man with the ball, and if they do anything like that against Man City, they are just going to run absolute rings around them and should score between 2 and 4 goals in this fixture. So if you are still holding on to United assets, I think now is definitely the time to get rid. I have been saying it for a little while, but even though they do have a couple of nice fixtures after that City fixture, they are still only barely scraping by in these pretty easy fixtures. So all in all, it was a huge week. Super stoked to be where I am after 9 game weeks in the season in the top 25k. However, that is not quite high enough to be top of the FPLFanatic League. So we've got a league running for the channel. There is a link in the description below if you are interested to join and follow along with the channel. Newcomer Nick Olieslager, apologies if I've got that wrong, Nick, but he has entered the league as of game week 9, coming in with an absolute monster score of 107 points. And that 107 points has got him all the way up to 4.3k in the world. He pulled his wildcard in game week 8, as you can see below, and he's gone with a Haaland-less draft. So he was 180k in the world, pulled his wild card. That has shot him all the way up to 28k overall heading into the game week, and then a monster score of 107 in game week 9 without Haaland in his team has catapulted him up to 4.4k overall. I'll just very quickly read this team out, as it is a Haaland-less team that has come through very strong. He's got Turner in net with 1 point, Trippier at the back with 10 points. He's one of the players that you can jump on if you do go without Haaland. Cash with 2 points, Romero with 8. Romero actually had an amazing game in that Spurs fixture this morning. Saka with 5, Maddison with 9, Luis Diaz with 6, Son with 14, and Salah captained with 32 points. That is the monster midfield that I am looking to go with in game week 10, as Saka coming in for Mbeumo would give me this exact midfield, which is what I'm looking at. However, he's got Watkins up front alongside Julian Alvarez, which would mean that I would have Haaland and a make-way striker in João Pedro, who I did talk about last week as to who I'm eyeing up in order to be able to afford Mbeumo up to Saka. Massively stacked team. He's got Areola on the bench, so very, very common goalkeeper pairing on wildcard there. Ben White, an interesting player who was brought in for Robertson this week and benched, so he's actually making moves to avoid price drops by the look of things, or potentially to get some cash out in order to make a move this game week. Archer on the bench and Lamptey as last spot, hoping that he's going to be back for Brighton's run of fixtures, as Brighton have been playing Solly March in left back with both Estupinan and Lamptey out injured. Huge team, very differential, and doing incredibly well. So congratulations, Nick. I am coming to hopefully hunt you down. I'm about 20 points off the pace in the league. So we've got Nick Olieslager first with 632 points overall. Cam Elliott has been in the league for a little while, near the top. I think he's been top the last couple of weeks. Another big score from him, 623. Nomi Raja, apologies if I've pronounced that wrong, at 619 points. And then myself at 613 in 4th place, and Daniel Huxtable to round out the top 5 with 611 points. It's very close from there on down. There's only a handful of points within it in the league. So if you are at all interested in joining, do hit that auto join link in the description below. So the actual only talking point for this video, so we'll be doing a team selection video a little bit later in the week where I will go over captaincy and the decision that I do arrive at for what I'm going to do with my team, but I will just talk through all the decision points that I am thinking through. So this is just a bus team where I've just set it up without too much thought. Initial gut instinct on the captaincy has gone on Salah, with a vice captain on, well, it's on Mbeumo at the moment, but that is indicating that my current thoughts are that the person that I will be putting in that slot will be the vice captain, as I am leaning a little bit more towards swerving Ollie Watkins, even though he is in such good form. I'll be playing Johnston over Turner, and everything else is pretty much standard, as my bench is basically dead and I never really call on them. So in last week's video I discussed my potential plans for bringing in Saka for Mbeumo by downgrading Julian Alvarez to João Pedro. Now I did own João Pedro as of game week 1 and held on to him for the first 5 game weeks of the season, knowing that he would be a little bit of a rotation risk in the team. I ended up selling him for a hit at about game week 6, I think it was, to bring Julian Alvarez in order to catch a price rise, which didn't go so well in game week 6, but since then he's gone 8 to 9, so he's basically paid the hit back, and I have earned a little bit of value out of him as a result. But he is the only player that I could downgrade in this team in order to fit Saka in for Mbeumo. So I have absolutely no plans of selling Haaland, Salah or Son. I want to be holding on to Son for quite a while. I jumped on him very quickly and very early on. Picked him up for 9.1 million. He is now up to 9.5 million, and it's probably going to rise in value again. And so if I was to sell Son, getting him back again is going to cost me about another 0.2 or 0.3, depending on when I sell and how Son's price goes up over the coming game week. So I actually have no plans to sell him. I also have absolutely no plans of selling James Maddison either, as I brought him in game week 1 for 7.5 million, and he is now shot up in price all the way up to 8.1 million. And so if I was to sell him and I ever wanted to get him back, would be actually quite a lot of money that I would have to find to fit him back in, and money is already pretty tight in my squad. And the upcoming fixtures for Spurs aren't actually too bad. I mean, Crystal Palace away, not going to be that tough. Chelsea at home will be a hard game. Chelsea, by the way, absolutely dominated Arsenal in the fixture at the weekend. It looks like Pochettino's system is finally sinking in with the players in that squad. Cole Palmer is looking like an exceptional asset, and I will go over him in a little bit more detail in this video. So this Chelsea fixture for Spurs will be a little bit hard, but I don't think it's worth selling Son or Maddison over. Wolves away is a great fixture. Aston Villa at home should be a very open fixture and good enough for any attacking assets. Obviously Man City away in game week 14 is going to be really tough. West Ham away, I am not too worried about at all, and then Newcastle at home could be quite tricky. But then past that point, it's an absolutely great run of fixtures. So there's really only Chelsea in 11, City in 14, and Newcastle in 16 that are tougher fixtures for Spurs assets. But is it worth taking the value hit when I know that these players can score points in these fixtures? I don't think so. So I will just be holding on to Haaland, Salah, Son and Maddison for the foreseeable. This basically leaves very little options in order to get Saka into the team, and I do also want to hold on to Luis Diaz for his short run of fixtures of Nottingham Forest at home, Luton away, and Brentford at home across the next 3. He's only owned by 9.3% of the game, and at my rank, he's actually only owned by about 3.5% of managers in and around my total points tally. So he's actually a huge differential. 3 really nice fixtures, and looks to be pretty nailed on in that Liverpool lineup. So to jump back into Watkins versus Saka. So the 2 options that I have is either Mbeumo and Alvarez out for Saka in midfield and João Pedro up front, or to go with Watkins up front and Cole Palmer in midfield, who I actually noted in last week's video that he has emerged as a great potential option. Having watched that Chelsea versus Arsenal game, for about 83 minutes of that match, Chelsea were by far the better team than Arsenal. Arsenal weren't just quite clicking, however they did manage to still come away with a result, which just goes to show that Arsenal was still vying for the top spots in the league, similar to what they did last season. They did have some relatively shabby games in the season last season, but they did still manage to come away with points, and clutch points that they shouldn't necessarily have earned in matches, which does go to show the quality that it's there. The problems with Chelsea was, as soon as Pochettino made some subs, the subs that came onto the pitch, which included Reece James, by the way, Reece James came onto the pitch with Gusto still playing right back, so James came on at right mid, but it basically all fell to pieces as soon as those substitutes were made. That is not at all Pochettino's fault. I mean, he has to be able to rely on his subs late in the fixture, but I think it just goes to show that Chelsea were terrible start of the season. They are now playing much better football, not necessarily for the full 90 minutes, but they are a team on the up and up, and are definitely worth looking at. For someone like Cole Palmer, 4.9 million. He is the best attacker in that team, ahead of Sterling, I think, just based on the football that I have seen him play. He's got great vision, great touch, great shot selection. He was unlucky to not come away with more returns in that Arsenal match, as he did strike some shots that just missed the far post when he was shooting from inside the box. And so he is a really good option, which does free up enough funds for me to get Julian Alvarez all the way up to Watkins. So I've got 1.1 million in the bank, which isn't enough to go from Alvarez up to Watkins. So I do need to make 2 substitutes if I want to go with Watkins with my 2 free transfers. And so here's some of the things that I am thinking about. So a big part of this decision is obviously either Watkins or Saka. Now I think Saka is probably still a better option than Watkins, as he is playing in a bit of a better team. Although I say that without, there's not too much difference between Arsenal and the way Arsenal played at the weekend and how Aston Villa are currently playing. But Saka does have penalties, assuming he doesn't decide to give any more away, which I'm almost certain that he probably will. So the Saka versus Watkins debate is actually very close in terms of just comparing those 2 players. The fixtures favour Watkins over the next 2 to 3 game weeks, as Saka does have to go away to Newcastle in game week 11. But the big part of this transfer is the enabler that goes alongside Saka or Watkins. And so I've put last week's video, I went through all the 6.5 million assets, discussing why I like some and not others. So the top 4 players in the game, which I think are the best top 4 for 6.5 million ish. So some of these are a little bit less, some of them are a little bit more. But those 4 players are still in Mbuemo, even though his fixtures are about to turn. Matoma at Brighton, because he looks to be about as nailed on as you can get in that rotating De Zerbi side. Cole Palmer at Chelsea, 4.9 million, so not at all in the 6.5 million price point, but you kind of include him in that 6.5 million price point because that's sort of the enabler that I need. And João Pedro at 5.3 million, playing up front for Brighton. Looks like he might now be first choice starting cam player for De Zerbi, as I'll just bring him up here. I noted in the video last week that João Pedro started against Liverpool, which is a huge game for Brighton and for João Pedro to be starting that fixture, and he played all 88 minutes, and I said we needed to keep an eye on that, because if he then starts again against Man City and plays a good chunk of minutes, it's kind of an indication that De Zerbi has seen enough, he's worked enough with Pedro to be comfortable that he is one of their first choice starting 11 players. Now, he does still have a lot of options in that spot. However, Danny Welbeck did go off relatively early in that Brighton fixture, and so he may be out for a little while. We haven't heard anything yet, but that does increase João Pedro's chances at starting. But Pedro started with Welbeck in the squad anyway, so I'm expecting it'll probably be Ferguson up front in replace of Welbeck, with João Pedro in behind and Ansu Fati probably coming on a little bit later in the match. However, it is Brighton and De Zerbi. De Zerbi is rotating like crazy, and so there is still a chance that João Pedro will be rotated here. However, it is probably a little bit less of a rotation risk as compared to what it was at the start of the season when I owned him for the first 5 game weeks. And the next 4 fixtures for Brighton are primo. In fact, the next 7 are really good, apart from that fixture against Chelsea in game week 14. We've got Fulham at home, Everton away, Sheffield United at home, who are one of the whipping boys, Nottingham Forest away, Chelsea away, Brentford at home, which is, a middling fixture, and then Burnley at home, which is another team that are shipping a lot of chances. And so even if João Pedro is a little bit rotation prone, I'm almost certain he's still going to come onto the pitch with about 30 to 35, 40 minutes up his sleeve, including extra time in that second half. By that point, Brighton have typically worn down the weaker opposition in the team by the amount of possession that they have acquired and how quickly they move the ball. They play with pace. It requires the defence to move quite rapidly to keep in position, which actually does tire out their opposition a lot faster than a lot of other teams in the league. And so João Pedro coming on for the last 30 minutes of a match with penalties and that easy run of fixtures is why he is in my thoughts as an option in order to bring Saka into the squad. So Pedro's got the fixtures, but is a little bit of a rotation threat, whereas Cole Palmer looks like he is nailed as that number 9, well, not even necessarily as that number 9, because it did make a sub late in the match to bring Nicholas Jackson on. They put him up front and then shifted Sterling out to the left and Cole Palmer out to right wing. And so Cole Palmer just looks like he is well in that first 11 for Pochettino. He gave him a big hug midway through the match when Palmer, tried to get a ball and ended up on the sideline in the technical area, and he whispered in his ear, and it looked like a "you're doing exceptional, son, keep it up" type message that was coming in from Pochettino there. So Cole Palmer is looking like a really good asset, but Chelsea's fixtures are not great. So the second bottom on my fixture ticker when ordered by the next 8 game weeks. I mean, I'm not even really looking at the next 8 game weeks. I'm probably only looking for the next 2 to 3 game weeks. Even if we do that, I mean, 3 game weeks, they're bottom. 4 game weeks, they're dead bottom. 5 game weeks, they're dead bottom. 6 game weeks, they're dead bottom. And their fixtures read Brentford at home. It's not too bad of a fixture, but then they go Tottenham away, Man City at home, Newcastle away, Brighton at home, which is not too bad, and then Manchester United away, which is not actually a tough fixture at this point in time. Who knows, by game week 15, maybe Manchester United have turned things around, but that is not a great run of fixtures for Cole Palmer at Chelsea. And so these are this is the two decisions that I am weighing up. So while remaining in that 6.5 million price point, Diaby, Douglas Luiz, Gordon, Almiron, Ward-Prowse, and the Wolves assets are not at all in any of my thoughts for any reason. So I just do not rate these players. Douglas Luiz could come away with some returns as he is on penalties, and he does look like he can hit a shot from edge of the 18 when he gets the opportunity. But on the whole, I don't think these are very decent assets moving forward, and I just will not be bringing any of them into my squad. So it really is only Palmer or Pedro that I am really looking at. I should also note that I don't really want to sell Julian Alvarez. He's playing great football. He's still getting the majority of the minutes. He's ending up in some very dangerous positions on the pitch. He isn't always being found, but he is always in and around the box. Very central to play. And like I said, I think Man City are just going to absolutely smash Manchester United at the weekend, and I can definitely see Alvarez coming away with the points here, but he is the only way I can get to Saka or Watkins for game week 10. There's just basically no other way I can do it without wildcarding and downgrading a whole bunch of my defensive assets in order to scrape the funds together. And then maybe I could get Mbeumo all the way up to Saka and then hold on to Julian Alvarez, but it would be mad scrimping and saving, and I don't really think using the wild card in order to do that just to hold on to Julian Alvarez is really worth it. So some of the thoughts that are running through my mind is I do want some sort of Brighton coverage for the upcoming run of fixtures, and Pedro with penalties is somewhat flying under the radar and could be a very nice differential to run with. So I like to stack my squad with, the best players like Haaland, Son, Salah, Maddison, but I do like to have a couple of cheeky differentials in the cheaper price points to see if I can climb the ranks that way. And I think João Pedro and Cole Palmer, to be fair, could be really sneaky buys with a very low ownership that could help rise us up ranks. So what have I said here? However, Cole Palmer is looking like Chelsea's best player, looks to be nailed and also has penalties, as he took another penalty in this match. Very nice penalty as well, sending the keeper the wrong way with his body shape as he came up to that penalty and just calmly slotted it down the left-hand side. As I've already said, though, Palmer's run of upcoming fixtures is horrific. Brentford at home this week is decent enough, but then he has to play Spurs, City, Newcastle, Brighton and United. So I could look to jump on Watkins and Palmer just for the next two fixtures, or the next two game weeks, in order to block Watkins owners for this incredibly lucrative fixture at home to Luton this game week. Luton are one of the whipping boys. I've mentioned on this channel that I think they'll probably be last in the league come the end of the season. And so Watkins, in form with Villa playing some really nice football, is almost certainly going to come away with points in this Luton fixture. And so I could spend my two transfers on jumping on Watkins and going with Cole Palmer in midfield. Palmer with that fixture to Brentford, but then has Spurs in the following game week. That Spurs-Chelsea fixture, I think, will be pretty end-to-end. It'll be interesting to see how that goes down, as Chelsea are on the up and up. and Palmer could come away with something in that match. But game week 11 for Saka is where it gets a lot tougher, as he goes away to Newcastle while Watkins has Forest away, which is another really nice fixture for Ollie Watkins. So this is why I'm considering maybe going Watkins for the next two to avoid that Newcastle fixture in game week 11 for Saka. But if I was to do that in game week 12, I would be spending 2 transfers on buying Saka in midfield for Palmer and downgrading Watkins all the way to João Pedro. So just exactly the same 2 transfers that I am looking at to jump on Arsenal's incredibly good run of fixtures. And so if I do go for Saka from the outset, I actually save myself 2 transfers in game week 12, and my defence is actually coming up with some relatively tricky fixtures from a defensive standpoint in that time. So Udogie has to play Chelsea in game week 11. Wolves is not necessarily a banker clean sheet for Spurs, although I would bet that they would be more likely to keep a clean sheet. But then Villa and City, I think they almost certainly concede in, and so I'm going to want to be dealing with Udogie very soon. Cash is all good for the next couple of fixtures, the next 3 or so, but then he has to play Spurs in 13 and City in 15 and Arsenal in 16. And so I'll probably be running into some issues there. And similarly with Newcastle, Wolves away in 10. I mean, I'm definitely playing them in 10 regardless of what I do here. And Arsenal in 11 is a bit tricky. Bournemouth away in 12, and then Chelsea at home in 13 is not at all ideal for Newcastle. And so my defence is running into trouble over the upcoming game weeks, and those 2 extra transfers in game week 12 could in fact be a lot more valuable than potentially just blocking this Watkins versus Luton fixture in game week 10. So this is what I'm currently weighing up. I should also mention that, or bring back the point that Udogie did come off before the 60-minute mark. It might have been that he's come off with a knock here, so it is something that I might have to keep an eye on, which may affect my decisions as well. There are also Champions League fixtures this week in midweek, and so obviously I won't be making any decisions until all those games are played and I see that all my players are fit and ready. But that is currently what I am toying with at the moment. As of right now, I am leaning towards going with Saka and João Pedro in game week 10 to save the 2 transfers and deal with my defense in some future game weeks. But we will wait for the midweek fixtures to commence, see what the managers are saying in the press conferences later in the week to make sure Udogie is still fine, as I do not at all fancy playing Kabore away to Aston Villa this week. And I will be going over captaincy and vice captaincy in a lot more detail in my video later this week, which will be my team selection video. But that is it for today's video. So if you enjoyed this video and got something out of it, press the like button and consider subscribing. And if not, that's alright too. I appreciate you watching. And until next time, cheers.